you want me to let people in?
Give me 1 minute. Let's see about the cod.
It's 12 o'clock.
All right, let them in.
Come.
Hello, hello. Happy Saturday.
Oh,
How weird it is to see all of your faces on a Saturday.
No funciona.
Hello. Got double trouble in the Barrios family.
I'm Navi.
Carlos, did you just get a haircut?
no,
You look good.
thank you.
I think it runs in the family.
Hi, Agüita.
Cristina.
Hey, Vlad. Hey, Carm.
Lucas.
Eleanor.
Hola,
Luca.
¿qué más?
How's
Hello.
everyone doing? I'm seeing Team Jen. Hey, Jen. How are you?
Hey.
Hi. We're got a little fiasco this morning, so we're just measuring out our ingredients. But I thought
No
I'd come in and
worries.
say hello.
Today we're gonna
Hi,
take it a
Jen.
little bit easy, so no worries. You have some time.
Okay.
Hello, Jay. You're repping Pepsi today. I love it.
Going on, man? All well?
Your virtual back. Oh, there he is. The real background.
Hi, Jen.
Hola.
Oh, I have to
Happy
give him his
birthday for
medication.
tomorrow, Ajay, or the day after tomorrow. It's the 31st.
Your sound is breaking up, Ajay. I can't really hear you well. All right. So I just finished prepping my seafood. For those that haven't done that yet, we're gonna cut the calamari into rings. As you can tell here,
Yes.
I've got my my tentacles off to the side. So that's the calamari. I've cut my cod into just bite-sized pieces. That was the one thing that I didn't put in the list, but if you want to go ahead and maybe cut those up into bite-sized pieces, we can do that while the rest of the people join us.
Hola,
And I
Mike.
have peeled and deveined my shrimp. I got it right here, all in 3 separate bowls. So for those that are just joining us, we're just making sure that we got all the stuff that we're gonna fry ready.
Like,
Oh, they're gonna fry now.
is it in the
I should
Where
mute
is it?
myself.
Thanks, Jen.
My.
in the email?
All right. Hey, Monique, I see you hustling in the back. All right. So I know some of the other people that signed up are going to use the recording. So I think we have most of the ones that we're going to log in live with us. So Moko, welcome. Nice to see you again. Well, not see you, but feel your presence in one way. For those that are just joining us late or plugging in sound and video, we just want to make sure we have everything set up. Today's class will be relatively fast because we're just making a pretty simple caprese salad. And we're also going to make a frito misto. Frito misto is really just a platter of mixed fried everything. You can make that a vegetarian frito, or you could make it an exclusively seafood frito. Today, we're actually going to do both. So we have some shrimp that I have peeled and deveined. We have a bit of cod that I've just gone ahead and cut into just bite-sized pieces. And the idea is to just have it almost like a finger food platter. So, we're not going to have big pieces of fish like we did with the fish and chips class. Today, we're just going to have those bite-sized pieces. And the calamari, I've gone ahead and I cut the bodies into little rings. And then I've left the tentacles off to the side because we're also going to deep fry those. We're also going to set up our deep fryer like we have in the past, I believe for the fish and chips class. And by deep fryer, I mean just a big pot of oil. So I have this pot that I usually just leave with the oil in. We deep fry lots as a Colombian household and of course, food lovers. So I just have a big pot. If you're just using any one pot that you might have in your kitchen, you might just want to use a pot that's deep enough so that you can fill it with oil so that you can submerge things fully, but still not have that oil overflowing.
No, es bad. Coming this all.
So we're hearing some of you guys in the background. So if you don't mind just muting yourselves for the time being, feel free to unmute yourself, however, if you have any questions at any point. So we're gonna make the Fritto Misto, delicious. We're also gonna make an aioli for it. And an aioli is really just a flavored mayo. Mayos are very easy to make. You can cheat and just grab some mayo and mix it with some hot sauce, but today we're gonna teach you how to do just a basic mayo and flavor it with a little bit of smoked paprika and hot sauce to taste, and that just gives us a really nice spicy aioli to go with it. And we are going to make a caprese salad. So I was able to get some beautiful tomatoes of all sorts, shapes, and sizes. We have a nice heirloom tomato, beautiful green. These are kumatos, which are usually a little bit more purple, and I guess on camera you do see a bit of darkness. They're more red than I've seen them ever, but you could find them at grocery stores. They're called kumatos. They're beautiful. I also have these little tiny cherry tomatoes. They're lovely as well. Big pop of flavor. Some multicolored cherry tomatoes and some small tomatoes on the vine. The beautiful thing about a caprese salad is that you're really just highlighting beautiful tomatoes, and you're gonna balance that off with some of that cheese. Today I got some fior di latte, but you could use bocconcini, you can use buffalo mozzarella. This salad also eats really well with the burrata cheese. Shine it like right in the middle, and it'll make for a beautiful, beautiful salad. And finally, I'm gonna do some asparagus and some of the shiitake mushrooms. The shiitake mushrooms, if you guys want to maybe just start taking the stems off, that is really the only prep that we're going to make for those shiitake mushrooms. And you could just remove them with your hands, relatively easy. Just pull away, just trying to keep that cap intact. And really, we're just going to deep fry them whole, and they're going to crisp up beautifully in that batter. And finally, I guess talking about that batter, the batter today is going to be a very, very light batter. And we're using rice flour just to keep it a bit lighter. We're also going to be mixing that rice flour with a bit of white wine and some water and a couple of teaspoons of the baking powder. That just helps it become a little bit more fluffy and rise up a little bit. Okay, so first of all, I guess we're going to prep the tomatoes. I like to prep my tomatoes first whenever I'm making a caprese salad ahead of anything else that I'm making, because I like them to soak up in a bit of that lemon juice and olive oil while I make the rest of my recipe. So today we're just going to make the Fritto Misto other than the caprese. So we're going to get those tomatoes going. So grab a big bowl, relatively enough to big enough to fit all of your tomatoes, because we're going to give them a nice sauce and some lemon, some olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper, and some basil. And that's really just going to encourage those tomatoes to release some of their juices and just start marinating in their own juices, but also that lemon juice and the olive oil. And tomatoes are full of water, but they also do soak up a little bit of flavor. So in the past, we've talked about salt encouraging tomatoes or any other ingredient for the matter to release a bit of those natural juices, but we're actually going to leverage those juices and let those tomatoes soak up. So we're going to grab our tomatoes. And I like to play around with the colors and the shapes. So for this big tomato, if you have big tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes, I like to cut it into rounds. And the idea is to just think of the plating a little bit as you're making your knife cuts. And that goes for, being, try to getting them as nice as you can whenever you're dicing something or cutting something up that's not going to get cooked, because you are going to see those knife cuts whenever you plate. So for the tomatoes, the bigger tomatoes, I'm just going to cut into rounds. And I like to start just at the bottom of the tomato and just cut that little piece off and just discard it. And then I'm just going to proceed to just cut them into slices. Not too thin, because we do want that tomato to stand up and shine. So, roughly, I would say 1 centimeter or so in width. And we're just going to do that with a couple of the big tomatoes that we have. So maybe 2 of them we're going to cut like that. And we're going to cut a couple of those other tomatoes into little chunks. Like I said, the idea is to play around with some of the sizes. Usually when I get to that top of the tomato, I like to just cut that little root piece off. It isn't pleasant to bite into, but we do want to keep the rest of that tomato intact. So I just cut that piece off. So like I said, we're doing some tomato rounds, but we're also going to cut some of them into chunks. So I like to just go right down the middle through the root, and that gives me 2 half tomatoes. I just like to make a couple of incisions just to remove that little root piece that, again, it's just a little bit tough on to the bite. And we really don't want to have to pick a tomato out of our mouths when we're eating the salad. So, little knife cuts go a long way. Once I have the 2 half tomatoes, you could potentially cut these into wedges. And again, the idea is just to play around with the shapes and think of the plating as you're making these knife cuts. We're going to start adding all of these tomatoes that we're cutting to that same bowl. So all of these beautifully cut tomatoes, I'm just going to add them to that bowl. So again, we'll do the same thing with another one of the tomatos. A couple of incisions to remove that centerpiece. And we're going to cut that one into wedges again. And finish that off. Now, when we get to the cherry tomatoes, the little tiny ones that I found, I'm just going to leave intact. They're too little to do any knife cuts for. However, the little cherry tomatoes, regular cherries, I like to just cut in half, making sure that we're cutting right through the root, so that that little root piece, almost like when we cut those onions, keeps all those guts intact. We don't want to lose any of those guts. Of course, some of them are going to fall out when we start tossing them about and marinating, but we do want to help that tomato hold on to as many of those cuts as we can. I'm just going to make just one little knife cut right through that root piece and just keep them intact. Feels a little bit weird to be cooking with you guys on Saturday. Let me know if there's a better time. I know I've heard from some, especially people with kids, smaller kids, that Friday nights tend to get a little bit crazy, and it's that moment of bedtime, the 7 p.m. time slot. So we're kind of changing it around a little bit. And there's a couple of recipes that kind of just feel so much better in the daytime. I know I teased at the paella class a couple of weeks ago, but we do intend to do a paella class on a Sunday, actually, for lunch for Father's Day. And paella really is close to my heart because my dad was the one that taught me that dish, and he loves to cook it. We're going to celebrate paella class on Father's Day. I'm just going to continue cutting all the tomatoes just so they're nice and shining in that bowl, and you should already be seeing a beautiful explosion of color right in that bowl. Okay, so we got the tomatoes cut. And now we're just gonna marinate them with a bit of lemon juice, some olive oil, and some basil. So before we get into that, I just wanna make a couple of knife cuts for that basil. I believe my audio left, but am I back? Yes, okay, sorry. Phone call came in. Alrighty, so we are going to make a couple of knife cuts before we start marinating those tomatoes. So we're gonna grab some basil, and we're gonna grab all the bigger leaves that we can find, and we're gonna leave those little leaves for the garnish of that salad. So I like to just pick off some of the bigger leaves and just leave some of the smaller ones off to the side, because we're gonna just garnish our plate with those tiny leaves as soon as we plate them. But the bigger leaves, we're definitely gonna cut and add to the tomatoes so that they can marinate in that beautiful basil flavor. And there are just some things that go well together just naturally, and one of those is tomato and basil. You know that from all the Italian recipes, both cooked and raw. So I'm gonna grab roughly about, let's say 15 leaves of basil. And we've made this cut before in previous classes, but for those that haven't cut basil with us before, we're gonna arrange them one on top of each other, one another. We're gonna roll them into a tight little cigar. And this knife cut is called a chiffonade. And the idea is not to bruise that basil too much. Basil is a very delicate herb, so we all don't want to press on it too hard, nor do we want to make too many knife cuts. So I'm gonna, roll them into a little tight cigar, put quite some many leaves of basil, so I might just do it in two batches here. So we got basil leaves right on top of each other, and we're gonna roll them a tight little cigar. We're gonna grab our knife, just gonna start cutting, just one cut right through, and that gives us a chiffonade of basil. So little long strips of basil, being careful not to press too much on that herb, but also not going over it with the knife more than one time. And there are some herbs that we could do that with, and that's kind of like parsley, cilantro. Basil is a little bit more delicate. So I'm going to do the same thing with my other little cigar. And we got a chiffonade of basil. We're going to add that basil to the bowl with the tomatoes. And all of that is just going to pack it with so much flavor. We're also going to turn on the heat on our pot, that oil, canola oil, because we do want that to start heating up slowly. So we're going to turn on that pot on medium or medium high, being careful to just keep an eye on it and make sure that it's getting hot, but not too hot. So maybe I'll set up a 5-minute timer, and then we can check on that oil after 5 minutes and make sure that it's heating up.
I have one question, sorry.
Absolutely.
How much oil should we use? Or what's the ideal pan to use for this situation?
So the ideal pan for this situation is a deep pan, thick pan if you can. I've recommended, maybe using that pan or that pot, where you would make pasta if it's not too deep. And the idea is to have some depth, because we do want to fill the oil perhaps, at least 4 fingers, or I would say even 6 fingers of depth. And the idea is, we're going to deep fry the frito, so we do want it to be able to submerge in the oil. But when we do add it to that pot with the oil, it's going to rise in volume a little bit because of the volume of the solids. So we don't want to overflow that pot. So I like to just, as a rule of thumb, just maybe fill it halfway up the pot, but just making sure that we have at least 4 to 6 fingers of depth so that things can deep fry nicely. Okay, so we're coming back to the tomatoes and the basil, just chilling in the bowl. We're going to cut 1 lemon in half and We use a strainer so that we don't get any seeds in it. And we're just going to squeeze it right on top of those tomatoes. So squeeze that lemon, just the juice of one lemon. That's going to add a little bit of acidity. Tomatoes already have very nice acidity, but the lemon just tends to brighten it up a little bit. But do keep in mind that we will also be adding some balsamic glaze to it. So, we don't want to overwhelm it too much. But if this is not your first time here, you know that we love acidity. So we're going to be adding quite some to it. We have lemon, we have tomatoes, we have basil, and we're going to grab some olive oil. Oop, I have it out already. We have olive oil everywhere. And I like to be quite liberal, so, let's do call it 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And all of that is just going to make a beautiful, beautiful dressing. And we're going to be able to soak that up with our crusty bread. I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but somebody sent me a message this week. What is crusty bread? Help me out here. I Googled it. She's self-identifying on camera. Still won't say her name. Crusty bread just means, your favorite baguette. I think I grabbed some Blackbird Baking Co. Nice baguette that I found at Sanigan's. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful crusty baguette, a little bit of sourness. So I think it's a sourdough baguette. But any bread will do. And the idea is just to soak up all those juices that we're going to have from that dressing that we're making right here.
Sorry, I have one last step. I'm a first timer here.
That's okay.
How much olive oil again?
So just 1 to 2 tablespoons. Be quite liberal. Yeah.
And then balsamic?
And balsamic, not yet. So balsamic is going to be at the very, very end because it does bleed into it, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful plating. So we're going to leave that balsamic to the very end, right as we're about to plate. We're actually, after we plate, we're just going to drizzle a little bit on top of it. And finally, we're just going to add some salt and some pepper. So I like to do 2 pinches of salt. Tomatoes love salt, and they really, really soak that up. And some freshly cracked pepper, some ground black pepper, whatever you have. And that is really just going to start encouraging all those tomatoes to let out their juices and make a beautiful, beautiful dressing right in that. I'm going to give that a stir, making sure that all of those tomatoes have some basil, have some salt, that olive oil, that lemon juice. But being careful not to stir them too aggressively because we want all those guts from the cut tomatoes to stay attached. So, I mean, I almost just want to grab a bite of tomato right now. Invite you to do the same. And that's a good way to kind of gauge the transformation. So I just bit into a tomato. They got a bit of the acidity, a little bit of the salt, not so much basil yet. But we're going to see all these tomatoes really soak that in and transform in flavor and profile. So give it a try now, give it a try later. And we're going to continue adjusting a little bit of seasoning if we need to. We're going to forget about this bowl of tomatoes. So we've done that. We're just going to put these aside. It's been 5 minutes. So we're just going to maybe hover our hand over the oil. I can still tell that it needs a little bit more. So we're just going to give it another 3 more minutes just to make sure that it's where we want it. When we do get to kind of that temperature that we want for the oil, we do just want to leave it on medium. And that's just going to leave that oil temp exactly where we want it. I know in the past I've said that if you have a thermometer, it's a good idea to just check the temperature of your oil if you can. A good way to also check that temperature is to splash just 2 drops of water into the oil, and it should create an immediate reaction when it's hot enough. So no, don't do that yet because I know that it still needs a little bit longer, but maybe in a couple of minutes we could drop 2 drops of water into that oil and make sure that it's good. Okay, so we're gonna make our batter now for the frito. And I do just wanna make sure and check with all of you that we have the stuff that we're gonna deep fry nice and ready. So I'm gonna go over that first, just before we make the batter, because as soon as we make that batter, we might be ready to go. So I have my fish. I have some cod here, and I've cut it into just small bite-sized pieces. So if you haven't done that yet, just give those a cut. And when I'm actually working at my workstation and I have to move to a protein or something that's not vegetables, I like to just put another cutting board right on top of my main so that I could just discard that freely and just continue cutting my veggies. So if you are cutting some seafood or anything that's not vegetables, you might just want to use a different cutting board so that you can go back to your main. So we have the fish cut into bite-sized pieces. We have our calamari cut into rings with the tentacles on the side. And we have some peeled shrimp ready to go. And for veggies, I am doing some asparagus and some shiitakes. But honestly, any veggie works. If you want to do some red pepper triangles, you could do some fiddleheads, which are in season right now, and they're lovely. You could do mushrooms. You could do squash. So if you're doing any squash, you could cut it into rounds. So almost think of what you would get in a tempura platter, for example, at a Japanese restaurant. All of those things, it's going to be exactly what we're going to be doing. Just giving them a little bit of a soak in that batter and just deep frying them. For asparagus, if you were here last week, we ate a lot of asparagus, but we were just going to break off the woody ends, and they actually just break off really naturally. You have to clean these up ahead, just so that we're not cooking that woody end, and it's just that natural break. Okay, so back to our batter. We are going to have these, I believe, 3 cups of rice flour. We are going to do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of salt. And we're going to give that a bit of a whisk. So all of those dry ingredients, we just want them incorporated before we add our wet ingredients. Like I said, we have 3 cups of the rice flour, and we have 2 teaspoons of salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I do want to apologize to my neighbor who is here. I told her that this bottle of wine was for her, but Vanessa drank our other bottle of wine yesterday when we were doing another class. So Eleanor, we're going to be using your bottle of wine. I'll buy you one this weekend. Sorry about that.
All good. You know me. I always have wine.
Hey, David, I see you in the background. I'm guessing you're ready to feast. Don't be shy. Hey. Okay, so we have our dry ingredients here. We're also going to add then our wet ingredients as well. So we have 1 1/4 cups of white wine. And then we're going to do 1 1/4 cups of water. Now, I have made a very common blender and used a very small bowl here. So I'm going to grab a bigger bowl because we want enough room in our bowl so that we can add all of those cut seafood and veggies to our bowl and not worry about it overflowing. So I'm just going to transfer my dry ingredients here to a much bigger bowl so that I could just mix things freely and not worry about it overflowing. So I have my bigger bowl and I have 1 1/4 cups of white wine. I'm going to add that in. And I'm also going to prep 1 1/4 cups of cold water to add to that. That's the remaining of my wet ingredients. So I'm not going to add all of that water just yet. First, I'm just going to incorporate that wine. I mean, I already know that it's definitely going to need more water, but I do like to add things gradually, especially when I'm making a dough or anything like it, starting with the dry ingredients, and then just gradually, regardless of what the recipe says, start adding the liquids or the wet ingredients a little bit more slow. could always add more water, but it's hard to remove. And we'd have to add more flour. Start doing that dance. Consistency wise though, we are looking for almost like a pancake batter consistency. So even the 1/4 or the 1 1/4 cups of water, still falling a little bit short of that consistency that we want. So we're just going to continue whisking away and just making sure we're incorporating everything nicely, and we arrive almost like a pancake batter consistency. So I've added in total right now, I can show you kind of what my consistency looks like. It's still too thick, but I've added the full 1 1/4 cups of wine and the 1 1/4 cups of water. I'm just going to start drizzling in a bit of water slowly.
Hey, Jacob?
Yeah.
What's the substitute if we don't have the white wine?
The white wine, you could do soda water if you can, if you have even carbonated water. So you do want a little bit of that fizz, but just regular water as well, is provided it's really cold. That one that could work as well.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right. So I'm a little bit more happy with my consistency. It's a bit more runny. You know, it kind of looks like that pancake batter that's gonna, you know, as soon as we drop it, spread out on that pan and just kind of bleed a little bit. So that's exactly what we're going for. And we're gonna let this batter just hang out for a little bit because it does get a little bit more fluffy if we just let it sit for 20 minutes. We're just gonna leave this batter just chilling nicely. And then we're gonna proceed to make our aioli. So we wanna just start getting everything ready, because the one thing with this is that as soon as we're frying, we are ready to go. Which actually reminds me that I know I said that we're going to use the oven today, and it's not really to be cooking anything, but more so to keeping things warm. So I'm actually just going to use my little toaster oven and just keep it on warm, or like 200 degrees, because the idea is that we're going to start frying things in batches. We don't want to overwhelm the oil, but we do want to keep all of that stuff nice and crispy and nice and hot. So turn on your oven, whichever one you're using, to 200. And I've set up just a little baking sheet with a little parchment paper, just so I can start putting some of the stuff that's coming out of the fryer on that, so that it can stay nice and hot. We are, like I said, going to work in batches. So we are going to start with the veggies first, because they can, you know, hold for a little bit longer. And we want that seafood to be the last thing that we fry, because as soon as that's done frying, it's time to eat. So let's go back to that aioli. So we have, you know, the standard makings of a mayo, which is egg yolks, lemon juice, a little bit of Dijon mustard to help emulsify. We have oil, and we're gonna use half and half of olive oil and canola oil. That just gives us a little bit of an extra flavor of the olive oil without it being too much. And really the process of making a mayo is just emulsifying the oil onto those egg yolks. And some of the acids that's going to help us do that, sometimes, you know, you could use some vinegar, but we're going to use lemon juice today. And a good emulsifier is Dijon mustard. So we have egg yolks and Dijon that are going to help us just emulsify that oil. And by emulsify, I mean just integrate so that it just becomes this really, really creamy aioli. We can do that with a whisk and perhaps develop some whisking muscle, or we could do that in a blender or a food processor. I'm going to use a blender today, just makes it a little bit easier, and I have my whisk in the batter. So I'm going to do that with a blender, but feel free to do it with a whisk if you'd like. We are going to work together on this, because the oil is the last thing that we're going to add, and we're going to add it very slowly. So just bear with me, and we're going to do this together. So first, we're going to separate 2 egg yolks from the whites. I'm just going to grab a small bowl here so I can do that. And I like to just crack the eggs right into a bowl and then just pick off the egg yolks. Some people like to just kind of leave the egg yolk in the shell and just start working the whites away from it, but I find this to be a little bit easier. And you could always reserve these egg whites for breakfast tomorrow or something else. You could always use them as an egg wash. So I'm gonna grab just 2 egg yolks right out of that white. Just put them straight into my blender or the bowl, wherever you're gonna whisk this aioli. So I'm just gonna put them right into that blender or food processor. And again, just separating the egg yolks from the whites, because those are the only ones that we need to use for this recipe. So I got 2 egg yolks in there. Now we're gonna check our oil, just because if we are on medium high, we might have to turn it down a little bit. So I just dropped a couple of drops of water onto the oil, and you could already feel that responsiveness. It's kind of just singing to me, saying, yes, I am ready. Please give me something to fry. So we're just gonna let that hang out for a little bit. I'm just gonna keep my oil just at a medium low for now, so that it doesn't drop in temperature, but it also doesn't burn. So if your oil is hot enough, just leave that, chilling on medium low, and we're gonna continue with our aioli. We're also going to be adding 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and that's just gonna help that oil emulsify as well. So gonna add 1 tablespoon of that Dijon. We're also going to press 2 garlic cloves into that. So I'm gonna get 2 garlic cloves into my garlic press and just go straight in with that. Just right onto that same blender, food processor, or if you're using a bowl to whisk it manually, you can just do that straight onto there too. We're also going to take the juice of 1 lemon, and we're going to add that to that same bowl, or that same blender, I mean. Be careful not to let any of those seeds go in, because they are quite bitter. So really all we want is that juice of 1 lemon. If you love acidity, we could always add a little bit more lemon. I actually find that that Fritto Misto really, really likes lemon. So we're gonna garnish it with some lemon wedges so that we could squeeze right on it, or we could also make our aioli a little bit more citrusy if we want. So we got juice of 1 lemon.
Yes, hey, Jacobo, sorry to be a pain.
No,
Can you
it's
show
not a
us
pain.
the top of your blender so we know what you're putting in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Or
I'm not sure if you see it here.
so what have we put in there?
Garlic.
So it's garlic,
So we have-
lemon, and the egg yolks, right?
Yeah, and 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. Yeah. So the last thing that we need to do is get our oils ready, because we are going to add those slowly. So I like to just grab a measuring cup with a spout so that I can just add that gradually. And I'm just gonna measure that olive oil first. I'm gonna do a 1/2 cup of the olive oil onto my little bowl, onto my little measuring cup here. You're gonna use this one because it has a better spout. So we're gonna put the bigger one. We're gonna do 1/2 cup of this. And then after we emulsify this full 1/2 cup, we're going to add another 1/2 cup of the regular canola oil so that we can get it all the way to that consistency and the volume that we need. So before we add any of the oil though, we are going to blend the things that we have going on right now. And we cannot forget just a pinch of salt as well. That's just gonna help with that gratiness and a bit of the seasoning right off the bat.
Sorry, Jay, how much oil?
So we're gonna do half a cup of the olive oil for now. And then we're also gonna use half a cup of canola oil as soon as we are done putting the olive oil into the blender. So we're gonna do half a cup of olive, half a cup of canola for a total cup of oil. Okay, so we're going to blend the egg yolks, garlic, Dijon, lemon juice, a little bit of salt. Just gonna give that a little bit of a buzz. And what I'm gonna do now is just remove the lid, or if we have a food processor with a bit of a hole at the top, we're gonna start drizzling that oil nice and slow so that it starts emulsifying. By emulsifying, I mean just like integrating and creating this creamy aioli that just looks just like a mayo. So that's the consistency that we're going for. So while the blender is running, I'm going to start adding that slowly. I'm just gonna lift. And the idea is just to start adding it in a gradual little just stream, so that it's just falling right into it. I'm try to move my blender a little bit closer, except the plug is a bit far, so I don't think you'll catch it. But yeah. So I've just finished adding half of a cup of olive oil, and I'm already seeing a little bit of creaminess, still a bit runny, and that's okay. But here you could probably see it right here, but the color has changed, and you could almost just see that it's fully integrated. A little bit of yellow, it's really nice, but it's all together in one. And the reason why we're adding that oil slowly is so that it doesn't separate and separate just from the egg yolk. That's really the reason why we're adding it slowly while the blender is going. So we're gonna measure out another half cup of that canola oil now. We're gonna do the same thing that we did with the olive oil. We're just gonna get our blender going. We're just gonna start adding that slowly. And you could tell even just from the sound of it that it's getting a bit thicker and going to that consistency that we want. So if you take a look, I'm already, getting that mayo-like consistency. It's a little bit runny. I'm just gonna put it just right into a bowl now, because I want to be able to just finish seasoning it with that paprika and that hot sauce. I'm just gonna empty it out onto a bowl so that you can see that consistency, but it's pretty much almost like a mayo-like consistency. And this mayo is really just the most famous aioli. That same process. This is actually the same process that you would do to make a Caesar dressing. It's just really just a mayo that is flavored with some capers, some anchovies, but it's exactly the same thing. You can really just use this recipe to make whatever flavor mayo you like. Make a horseradish mayo, you can make a pesto mayo. We're gonna make a spicy mayo today with a little bit of paprika. It's gonna go really well with our fish. It's gonna fall here, so let me just get this out of the way. All right, so how is your mayo and how are you guys doing? Because I know this is the one step that could perhaps be a little bit tricky for some. I see hand blenders, I see blenders, I see food processors. Pilar, I see you all worried, frazzled. You okay? You're touching your hair nervously. What's going
I
on?
ran out of oil.
Okay.
Good thing we have good sous chefs here. So
There you go. We got runners. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. I see, well, Carm is calling his oil man. He's like, dude, I need some oil. Everyone's running out of oil. Monique did give me a heads up, and I apologize for not sending you a message, but in the ingredients, the itemized ingredients, it does call for some oil, but in the shopping list, I forgot to put that oil there. So if that one was my fault, I do apologize. We'll get. Okay, so we have our aioli. Have you guys tried it yet? Give it a little bit of try. You should be getting a little bit of that garlic, a little bit of Dijon, pretty strong flavors. And we're just gonna add a little bit of paprika, and a little bit of hot sauce to taste. And that's really just gonna round it off and just add a little bit of sweetness. That basic aioli can be a little bit strong, especially with a little bit of that garlic. It goes a long way, the 2 cloves of garlic. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of paprika. I have smoked paprika here, but any paprika will do. And just about 2 teaspoons worth. I like to just go to taste. And we're also going to add some of that hot sauce. I have sriracha. I'm just gonna add a couple squirts of sriracha. We do like a lot of spice here, so I'm just gonna add some of that and just give it a mix. And that should completely start also changing that color from that pale yellow to a little bit more of a little, red tint from that paprika. And we should be able to taste both the paprika and that sriracha. So give that a mix. You should have just a mayo-like consistency, not too runny, just perfect for a dip. I'm gonna dip all of that Fritto in there. I've given it a try. It's really good. I will be inclined to add a little bit more lemon a little bit later, but for now, we're just gonna let it chill for a little bit, and we're just gonna put it in the fridge. I think today's a little bit hotter than yesterday's winter, so we don't want that to split. So let's just put that aioli as soon as you're done seasoning it with that paprika and the hot sauce. I have sriracha. Just gonna put that in the fridge, but this is kind of what we're going for. A little bit runny, just like mayo, and just that beautiful kind of orangey color from the yellow egg yolks from the aioli, with some of that paprika, and so just get that in the fridge and just let that hang out for a little bit. And we are ready to get frying. So we're gonna return to our batter, give it a couple more swirls, making sure that it's fully incorporated. We have our batter ready. We're also going to get a bowl, just a regular bowl, and we're gonna put some paper towel on top of it because we are going to start taking things out of the fryer into that bowl of paper towels so that it can soak up any of that remaining oil and not stick to it or stick with it. So we're gonna go veggies first. We're gonna do veggies, dip in the batter, throw in the oil, fry it up, come out onto the bowl with paper towels, drain it, hit it with a little bit of salt, and then put them on that sheet tray with a parchment paper into that warm oven that we have here. And the idea is just to keep those nice and warm, nice and crispy while we finish frying everything else. And then we plate and we're ready to eat. Now, keep in mind that anything that comes out of a deep fryer, we want to hit it with a little bit of salt, and that's just going to help it stay crispy. It's super important. We're not really adding the salt for seasoning, although it does kind of give it a bit of a pop. But what we are looking for is for that salt to just help all that crispiness stay intact. So we're going to go with our veggies first. So I'm going to grab some of my veggies here. I'm going to put my bowl with that with the batter just right next to the fryer because I want to work almost in sequence. So I want to go veggies, batter, oil, and then just dump it out onto the bowl, and then onto the sheet tray. I'm just going to put them all kind of in my workstation so I can work just as a sequence, not make a mess, and just know what step follows what. So again, we're getting ready our veggies. We have our batter. We have our oil that we had turned down to low, and now we're just going to bring back to a medium so that as soon as we start throwing things in there, the temperature of the oil doesn't go down and we can stay deep frying. However, we are looking for some feedback from that oil. So when we drop that first little bit of veggies, that oil doesn't react right away and it doesn't just start sizzling a bit and frying. We're just going to let that come up to temperature a little bit more so that we're just deep frying it right away. And that's one of the things that we're looking for when we're deep frying. We want that oil to be nice and hot. If it's a little bit too low, it's just going to soak up that oil into the batter and it's really not going to come out crispy. So I'm going to do a couple of test asparagus here, just so we can see whether that oil is ready or not. So again, I'm just dipping it into that batter, letting it drip a little bit, or maybe just rubbing it off to the side, and then dropping them in the oil. And we're hearing for that feedback, that sound feedback, a little bit of bubbling. That asparagus went down to the bottom and just floated right back up within seconds. That's exactly what we're going for. Now we're going to work in batches here. So we're not going to overwhelm the oil. Keep in mind that we want that temperature to be stay hot. We also don't want to add too much of that batter to the oil because then it's going to start getting pretty dirty. So we're just going to work in batches here. I'm going to add, close to 6 or 7 asparagus per batch, keeping in mind, the size of my pot. So if you're using a smaller pot, maybe work with a little bit less. If you're using a much bigger one, then feel free to just add some extra asparagus or veggies in, or whatever veggie you're using. Now what we're looking for is already that oil to just be sizzling. We see that batter just start kind of coming together, still stuck to that asparagus, frying nicely. Asparagus are floating. And we're gonna get our spiders ready. So I have a spider, which is really just a slotted spoon. We call it a spider. And I'm gonna use that to just move the things around and just make sure they're not stuck to each other and they're frying nicely. Now, we gotta keep in mind too that, whatever it is we're frying, we gotta be mindful of its consistency and how hard it is and the frying times. So asparagus, you can eat asparagus raw and they're, just frying in hot oil. So they're not going to take too long. What we want for sure is to make sure that that batter is nice and crispy. So I'm just going to lift one up, give it a bit of a touch. I'm already getting really, really crispy batter. I know my asparagus is pretty good. I like the crunch in the asparagus. So I'm just going to start taking these asparagus out. So just as a little kind of guidance, I left this asparagus in that oil for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, no more. And what I'm looking for is a really crispy batter. Like you can just really tell that it's just nice and crispy. And it's very light. Like you should be able to see that green asparagus right through. And the idea is just to build a little bit of a coating over that asparagus, whatever it is that we're cooking. I'm gonna move on to some of those mushrooms, just so I can give you guys a bit of a tip or guide on how long these are gonna take. That same thing, the process is gonna be the same with everything that we're frying today. We're gonna soak them into that batter, making sure not to carry too much batter over to that oil. And we're gonna drop them just in that hot oil. It's just good to just work slowly. You don't want to splash too much. We also don't want to get burned. So the idea is just to work in batches, work safely, or work slowly, take your time. And we're just going to be frying these mushrooms. Now, the mushrooms, because of their surface area, they are going to need a little bit of more encouragement to just flip over. So we're going to just let them go for a couple of minutes. And then we're going to flip them over and allow them to cook on the other side. So I've got mushrooms here. And I'm going to add same thing like the asparagus. Just being mindful of the size of my pot. I think I have 8 of them in there right now. And I'm going to flip them over after a couple of minutes. And that is our veggies. Now, as things are frying, we do want to think ahead on the other elements for the rest of our dishes. So one thing that we haven't talked about is the cheese for the caprese salad. So I have some fior di latte here that is not opening. There we go. And usually these fresh cheeses come just submerged in some water. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drain that off and just get my cheese ready for my salad. So you could actually play with this cheese and eat it whichever way you like. You know, I like to sometimes put that big ball of cheese right in the middle, almost like a burrata salad. And then, you know, if you're serving it family style, maybe put it in the middle of the table and then people can start just getting pieces of that cheese with the tomatoes. If you're plating it individually, feel free to just start cutting this ball of cheese into different sizes or different pieces. You could even cut it into rounds as well if you want to do kind of a more traditional caprese salad of the rounds of tomatoes with the rounds of cheese. I'm just going to cut it into little chunks or leave it whole. It works both ways. But I'm just going to start kind of cutting the cheese so that I can spread it all over my salad once everything's done. Going back to the mushrooms that are frying, again, I'm just going to flip them over so that they can cook on the other side. But you already, I mean, if you're flipping it over after they've been in there for 2 minutes, you already feel that they're nice and crispy. That consistency is already there. And all that we're looking for is just 30 more seconds on the opposite side so that they can finish cooking. I'm just gonna finish just cutting my cheese. I'm just cutting the rounds into 4 so I just have little chunks of that fior di latte or buffalo mozzarella or the bocconcini. Just gonna give my knife a little bit of clean. And I'm going to look back at those mushrooms because they should be done. I'm going to continue repeating this process with the rest of my veggies. And don't forget to hit whatever is coming out of the fryer with a sprinkle of salt. And again, that's just going to help keep everything crispy as soon as it comes out of the fryer. So I've hit them with a bit of salt. Then I'm just going to line them up on my sheet tray with parchment. So I want to keep these nice and hot. So I've got my oven at 200 degrees. I've got my little fried mushrooms, fried asparagus. Feel free to leave one behind. No one's going to judge you if one of them doesn't make it into the oven and into your mouth. That's exactly what we should be doing anyway. So I'm going to leave one behind. And I'm going to put the rest in the oven so that they can stay nice and hot as we continue frying the rest of the things. So I'm going to do one batch of the fish, just because I want to make sure that we're all aware of kind of all the different processes. The fish is really the only one thing that we're going to season ahead of time. All the other ones are going to get some nice seasoning, both from the bit of salt that we're throwing onto them when they come out, but also with a bit of the salt that's in the batter. However, the fish needs a little bit more of that seasoning. So I'm just going to put them in a little tray or just in that same bowl, wherever you have them. And I'm going to just hit them with a bit of salt, a bit of pepper. And that's just going to help season that fish because white fish could really, really handle some seasoning. So you see all these types of white fish kind of used in recipes of blackened fish
Jay,
things like that.
sorry. Did you
No
put
problem.
the cheese on the salad already?
Not yet, not yet. So I
Okay.
just have it off to the side here because
Okay.
we're gonna plate the salad together. So all that I wanted to do is just start getting all my ingredients ready so that when it's plating time, we're good to go. So the one thing that we needed to do was just make sure that our cheese was nice and cut and ready for those tomatoes. So back to the fish. So we have our fish, and I'm just gonna season it with some salt and pepper.
The taco.
Yeah.
How did you do the cheese? Sorry.
That's okay. So I had a big ball of fior di latte, so it's a kind of like a big ball of cheese. But what cheese did you guys get?
We got this one.
Let me just flip over to you. Hold on. Yeah, beautiful. So you're gonna cut that into rounds that are kind of. Here, let me reconstitute a round for you. That's not the right round, but that's okay. So we're gonna cut into slices, and then that slice I'm gonna cut into 4, so that I end up with kind of little pieces of cheese
Oh.
that you see. However, I don't know if you've ever had burrata cheese. I like those fior di latte balls to kind of recreate a burrata salad when I cannot find burrata. You could also leave it whole and plate it right in the middle of the plate when we do the tomatoes. Put the tomatoes around it, and you could always just cut into that cheese right at the table already. So you could play with whatever it is that you like to do. I like to cut it into little pieces for this one.
Oh.
Okay, so we have our fish nicely seasoned already, and we're gonna do the same thing. You guessed it. We're gonna go into the batter, let that soak up, let it drip off a little bit so that we're not overwhelming our fryer with a bunch of just odd batter pieces, and we're gonna throw that in there. And the fish should take a little bit longer than the veggies, but not too long. Remember that we did cut it into smaller sized pieces, and the idea is just for it to kind of be in little chunks in the same way that the veggies are, the calamari and the shrimp. So we've kind of learned a couple of batters already in our series of classes. We did the fish and chips batter, and we also did this batter, but there are some things that remain consistent across the board. So we're always use a flour. So today we're using rice flour to keep it a little bit lighter. Last time we used a mix of flour and cornstarch. We always use some carbonated water or fizzy water or beer or wine, and that just gives a little bit of puff. We try to use our liquids that we use in our batters nice and cold, and the contrast and the heat difference between the cold batter and the hot oil just allows it to create that big reaction and fry up really, really nice. And we also encourage the batters with a little bit of the baking powder so that it rises a little bit and just becomes nice and fluffy. So, batters you can make however you like, and you can learn a couple of things from each of the batters that we have made so far and come up with your favorite batter. This one, because of the rice flour, you could already see in those fried veggies that the consistency is much thinner. And because we have so much fried stuff today, we do want to keep it nice and light. We want the crunch, we want that deep fry, but we don't want to be too heavy. This is one of these meals that is nice to have, outside on a patio or just in your backyard if you have, a table out there and just kind of munch away in a beautiful summer day. These are kind of just some of those recipes that we love to eat in the summer. It's just really, really nice. So I have my fish in the fryer, and I'm gonna do shrimp after. So the shrimp, we don't really have to season that much. We could hit them with a little bit of salt if we prefer, just a little bit in that same bowl. But it was only the fish really that we had to make sure that we were adding a little of seasoning. And don't forget that anything that comes out of the deep fryer, we're also going to hit with a bit of salt to keep it crispy and add a little bit to the seasoning there. Do keep in mind as well that that aioli is quite strong in flavor already. We're going to give a squirt of lemon or plate it with some lemon wedges to give a squirt of lemon once everything's ready and at the table. So, you know, all of that is really just going to come together into a delicious, delicious dish. The fish, I do like to move around a little bit. They tend to stick a little bit more, but I'm already getting that beautiful color, nice and crisp. It kind of remind me of those fish and chips. As soon as we got nice color, that fish is nicely cooked inside. No worries there. And we're also, like I said, going to put it right in that 200-degree oven so that it can stay nice and crispy, and just that carryover heat will cook any part of that fish that could perhaps not be already cooked. But the outside is fried. It's nice and crispy. Let me move over to this camera and I can show you just that nice color of the fish. And again, cannot forget, hit them with a little bit of salt as soon as they come out of the fryer. I love using fish in this dish, and you know, if you only have calamari, if you only have shrimp, you could also use that. But I find that the fish really just adds and takes that Fritto Misto to the next level. And you could use any white fish, to be honest. You could use sole, pollock, you know, anything that you have handy. You could always just do that. Now I'm going to go back to my fryer, and I'm going to drop a batch of shrimp. So I got little shrimpies in the batter into the fryer. It's just that same process that we've been doing with the rest of the veggies and the seafood. Being careful not to splash where we're dropping, and being careful to drip off some of that excess flour in the bowl before we get to the fryer. If you ever want to make the fried calamari dish, I do like to use this batter. There's different ways of doing calamari. You could actually just do kind of a dry rub and a dusting of cornstarch or flour. But I do like this liquid batter because it does feel that it gets a little bit more crispy, and it hangs on to the calamari or the shrimp or the fish a little bit better. When you do a dusting without any liquid ingredient or any liquid component, I find that the kind of that breading tends to fall off the calamari. So I like this batter because it just keeps it nice and light, nice and crispy. Okay, so I've added a batch of my shrimpies in there. And I'm gonna get some calamaris lined up, ready to go to bat. I've left my fish out of the oven on camera and nobody told me. That means you just concentrated on yours, which is fine. I've got my bowl. If our paper towels are nice and saturated with oil, I'm just gonna refresh those and line them up with two new ones. And I'm guessing you're cooking with 2 peeps. I see a lot of couples, a lot of families on camera. So if you got free hands, we also want to start slicing our bread, because we are going to want that bread to soak up all those juices from the tomatoes. So I like to cut my bread on a bias. Oh my goodness. I just had one of the mushrooms. So good. So I like to cut my bread on a bias. And that just gives me a little bit more surface area as opposed to cutting them straight down and end up with little tiny rounds. So I like surface area because the beautiful thing about crusty bread is that, you know, the crust allows it to just hold nicely, but that inside is going to be beautifully soft and it's going to be able to soak up all those juices. So I'm going to just cut my bread on a bias so that I can soak up all those tomato juices. I'm just going to put that off to the side on the plate. And I'm also going to return to my tomatoes. And I'm going to give them a stir. So I want to make sure that I'm tasting for seasoning. So we want to make sure that they have enough salt. I want to make sure that we're happy with the acidity, keeping in mind that we're also going to add some balsamic. So we're going to give all those tomatoes a stir, and we're going to try one of them again. We should see taste a pretty visible taste difference from that first tomato that we tried to a now marinated tomato. So you should for sure be getting hints of that basil, a little bit of more of a mellow taste. They've softened up a little bit, but they're still holding their own. Can't forget about those shrimpies. They also cook relatively fast, and I think that's the beauty of this recipe as well. Talk to me.
Where do we put the cheese?
The cheese, we're just going to leave off to the side in a bowl or in that same container where it came, because we're going to plate it right when we're close to plating. So we're going to do that shortly. So keep it handy because we're coming close to the end here, and we want to make sure that we're plating that. So as soon as I drop this calamari, I'm going to start plating that tomato salad. So if you have extra hands, you might want to start getting all of that stuff for the tomato salad ready. And that's really just going to be the bowl of the tomatoes, the cheese, and you're going to keep that balsamic glaze handy, and you're going to keep those smaller leaves of basil handy as well. That's going to be our garnish. So these rings are a little bit of a pain in the butt to start working with because they're tiny, and they're going to cook relatively fast. So calamari is one of those things that you can cook for 40 seconds or you could cook for 40 minutes. Anything in between, and you get really, really chewy calamari. So it's simple to make, but the timing of it needs to be closely monitored. So I like to work in even smaller batches with the calamari, just making sure that I drop some pieces in there and I move to then rescue them shortly after. Just under a minute. Calamari cooks relatively fast.
We have a question again.
Yeah.
For how long do we cook the calamari?
40 seconds to 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
40 seconds to 1 minute. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. That's what we're here for. I have my bowl here. I need to put things in my oven to keep warm. I'm already at 23 seconds and counting. Need to get back to that Cali. Offload the shrimp. 33 seconds and counting. 36. Almost there. Running out of time. And we're gonna start removing that calamari if it's already been in there. We want to make sure though that it's crispy. So if for some reason at 40 seconds you go handle it and it's not yet crispy, just leave it all the way till the 1 minute mark. It really just depends on that temperature of your oil. We don't want soggy calamari, so we do want to for sure make sure that it's nice and crispy. But I do like to start monitoring it right at the 40-second mark. There you go. So I guess that makes it a 55-second cook. And we're gonna take them out, hit them with a bit of salt, and put them in that oven. So how are you guys doing for your fried stuff? So I wanna make sure that we're all frying everything that we intend to fry today, but we're also not waiting too long so that the stuff that we have in the oven dies on us. So is there anybody still to fry much more stuff, or are we all kind of, yeah?
As los barrios need a bunch of time for the frying stuff, or oil was
okay. No problem.
Behind too.
No problem. So don't worry, continue frying your stuff, and I'm just going to show you how to plate the salad, and we're going to hold off for that balsamic drizzle for the very, very end. So we can plate the salad as is. We could garnish it. We could just take it all the way to the end, and we can leave that balsamic drizzle to the very, very end. So no worries there. I'm going to turn off my oil. We're just going to hit stop here for us, at least on this end, when it comes to frying. But I want to make sure that we all know how we're plating this stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna continue frying that stuff. Don't rush it. Do your thing. We're all here cooking. But I want to move on to the plating, just in case some of you are done frying. I know the Jay and Preeti are overachievers here in the kitchen, and they're always, hands crossed, waiting for all of us to catch up to them. So I just want to make sure that we're all rocking this. I see you hustling today, Preeti. You're more action today than I've seen any other day.
I know, we're behind today.
Oh, okay. All right. It must be the Saturday feels.
Another question here, Hakul. What
Yeah.
happened with the bread? Maybe I skipped that part.
No worries. So the bread, we're just going to cut it on a bias because we want to create as much surface area on that bread as we can so that we could then absorb all of that beautiful tomato juice. So I just cut it just on an angle, and then I just put it on a side plate because we're not going to plate it on that same plate as the salad. The bread is more kind of like the bread that you get when you cook mussels, is really just to soak up all that goodness because we don't want to leave it behind on the plate. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So onto the plating of the salad, and I'm just going to plate it. If you guys are not here, that's more than fine. I just want to walk you through how I like to plate these salads. But like everything, when you're cooking, when you're plating, you're doing this for you. So whichever way you prefer, that's the right way. A couple of things with plating though is that we want to make sure that we're highlighting the colors, we're highlighting the different shapes, we're just making it nice and appealing on the plate. I love using these black plates, as you guys already know. Most of our food photos are with these black plates. I love the contrast, especially when you're talking about colorful dishes, and these colored tomatoes are just that. So if you are plating with me, or if not, just take a look. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my tomato rounds. The bigger tomatoes that we cut. I'm going to lay them in the bottom of my plate. And that's just going to kind of create the base where I'm going to build off the rest of my salad. So I just got a bunch of tomatoes. Let me move this a little bit so you can see better. Some tomatoes at the bottom of my plate. And then I'm going to grab a slotted spoon so that I can start bringing some tomatoes over without bringing too much juice. All that juice we are going to add at some point. We're not all that juice, but some of that juice. But as you already taken a look in that bowl of tomatoes, the juice that has come out of the tomatoes themselves has probably tripled in volume. We don't want to overwhelm our plate with so much of that. However, we do want to add a little bit. So I'm using a slotted spoon to just start spreading those tomatoes all over my plate on a bed of the tomato rounds that I cut. And we're going to be able to just grab some of those little pieces of basil that we're marinating with the tomatoes, and we're going to add them right to that plate where we're going to plate the salad. Being careful to kind of alternate colors if you have different colors going. And this is exactly what we're looking for, just an explosion of flavor, an explosion of colors. Okay, if you are plating a ball of cheese right in the middle, and I would leave just a little bit of room right in the middle so you can plop the ball of cheese in there. If not, you could already tell that even when I was transferring tomatoes with a slotted spoon, there's so much juice already at the bottom of my plate. But I'm just going to reserve all this juice in the bowl in case I want to add some more as I'm eating it, or if I just want to soak it up with the bread later. But I'm not going to just put it in there just now. We're also going to grab our cheese pieces, and we're just going to put them here and there, just making sure that we're creating the contrast, leaving some tomatoes between the cheese pieces. And then we're gonna have even better contrast with that balsamic drizzle or the balsamic glaze that we're gonna drizzle. You could kind of prop some of those cheese under the tomatoes. And we got the makings of a delicious, delicious caprese salad. Just gonna keep some of this cheese. We want to be mindful of keeping that ratio going pretty well. At this point, we would also hit it with a little bit more salt. I like to use, if you have a coarse salt or a thicker salt, I have this like smoked thicker salt that I like to use for a finishing salt. And you know, the bocconcini or even the fior di latte, the buffalo mozzarella, they're pretty kind of bland cheeses in a way. They're super creamy, they're delicious, but they could really use some encouragement and some salt. So I like to just drizzle some of that salt all over the cheese and all over the tomatoes. I also hit it with just a little bit of black pepper. And I'm going to place some of those basil leaves here and there. So keep in mind that we use the bigger leaves for our chiffonade earlier. Those are already integrated with our tomatoes, but the smaller leaves of basil, we're just going to leave for our plating. And you know, in restaurants, sometimes we use some microgreens, which are exactly what it sounds like. They're little baby tiny versions of all these herbs that that you see and know about when we cook. But the little tiny leaves of basil actually serve that same purpose. So we have a beautiful caprese salad. We're not going to do this yet, but the last thing that we got left is some of that balsamic drizzle. If you guys joined us last week, we did a balsamic glaze. You could actually just find it in the store nowadays. It's extremely popular. I love Nonna Pia's. You can find it at Costco, but Unico also has a very nice balsamic glaze that you could use or you could buy. But also balsamic glaze is relatively easy to make. So it's really just some balsamic vinegar. You bring it up to a boil and you reduce it by half the volume that you started with. And you add a little bit of honey and that's it. It's really just that, you know, you bring it up to a boil, reduce it by half until you get that consistency that we associate with the balsamic glaze. A little bit of that honey is just to balance off some of that acidity and add a bit of sweetness. And then you can hold it in the fridge for some time. So it's extremely easy to make, but it's also awesome to just get it, buy it made already as well. So that's balsamic glaze for you, and we're gonna wait to add that to our salad close to the end. Just want to check in with the rest here and just want to know where you guys are at. I'm gonna, as you finish frying these this frito, I'm just gonna start plating my plate of the frito. Kind of just give you an idea of how I like to plate these guys. I'm gonna cut one lemon into wedges because I do want to add some lemon to my frito as I'm eating it. So I'm just going to cut lemon wedges first so that I could use in my plating. And we're also going to chop a bit of parsley. And the parsley is just so that we can give the frito a little bit of color at the very end as well, right before we plate it. And we don't need too much parsley. It's really just a tiny little bit so that we can again just give it a bit of contrast and just break off that that uniform kind of battered looking color. So I got some parsley, just a tiny little bit. I'm just gonna give it a fine chop, and I just grabbed the very top of a bunch of parsley, so there isn't really any stems. Just make a little ball of it and just chop it up really fine. If you need to go over it again, then feel free to go over it again. It's not like basil. It won't bruise, it's quite resilient. I like to just turn it, go over it with my knife, even just turn my knife and go over it again. And we get a nice little bit of parsley. And like I said before, we're also going to cut some lemon wedges, making sure we don't get any parsley on that lemon. So some lemon wedges. And for lemon wedges, I like to just cut the ends of the lemon and then just start cutting the wedges, making sure not to get the core. Nobody wants to get the core of a lemon when it's plated. Squeeze off the center core. So I like to just take a little bit more time in cutting those lemon wedges, being mindful that we all eat with our eyes first. So it's important to take a little bit more time, just make sure our knife cuts are nice, but also the product that we're presenting, it's really nice. And we did that with the tomatoes by cutting off a little bit of those fruit pieces. And we did it again with our lemon wedges here so that they don't have any seeds and no core. Okay, so I'm just gonna move my salad off to the side so I can bring my Fritto stuff that's in the oven out, and we could do a bit of plating there while you continue cooking the rest of your fried stuff. So got my Fritto, and we're just gonna arrange it just in a nice shape so that we can highlight all the different stuff that we fried here today. So again, I'm gonna use one of these black plates as well. I'm gonna give my cutting board a bit of a flip so that you're not looking at parsley, but rather looking at my plating. That's more like it. That's better. There you go. Okay, so I like to put the bigger pieces down first. So I'm gonna do all those pieces of the fish that we already cooked. Just kind of arrange them around it. And some of those shrimp pieces around it. Shrimpy, shrimpy. And some of that calamari right in about. And the whole crowd has gone silent. That moment of plating, or did I lose my audio? There's nothing like the hustle of plating when everything's coming to the end. Creates this like frantic adrenaline of movement, of dance, of intensity, of hustle. That's it, Pilar. I mean, you're moving happy. Carlos is moving a little bit more stressful. Eleanor tries to smile, but she's hustling. Carm is just working that fryer. Team Jen, I can't see you. I hope you're cooking. Jay and Preeti are finally working. It's like as if they weren't cooking before, except as photo evidence. So I can't discount that they actually made all the other recipes before. Maybe it's the kids, but I don't know. Just masters in the kitchen. All right, and I like to put those asparagus just over at the top. So I like that green of the asparagus kind of break off a little bit of that orangey yellow of the batter fish and curry. Okay, so we have this, and we hit it with a little bit of that chopped parsley, just a little bit. We don't want to overwhelm it. We're not cooking parsley here. We're just hitting it with a bit of that color. And we're gonna arrange those lemon wedges just around it. And what I did not do was leave room in the very middle for a ramekin of our aioli. So I'm gonna grab aioli out of the fridge. Like I told you guys, I must confess, I'm gonna squeeze a little bit more lemon into the aioli just to get just a tiny bit more acidity and sharpness. And we're gonna put it in a ramekin that we're gonna just put right in the middle of a big frito, because we're for sure gonna want some of this aioli to dip our fish into. I have made a complete mess of my ramekin. Now we'll clean those edges before plating it. I'm gonna be mindful to keep things pretty. We've worked too hard today to have our plating a disaster. So, if you ever need to clean the rim of your plates, and just make sure things look as they should. A little bit of steps there go a long way. I'll make some room in the middle of my plate for my ramekin of aioli. And I'm gonna just finish putting those lemon wedges around it. Ooh, I just tried a bit of calamari. It's amazing. Like it. Okay. So I think some of you are plating now. I'm gonna just get my balsamic drizzle going. So we have the frito just nicely arranged on a plate. I left my asparagus spears for the very top of it so that it could just contrast a bit of that color. I drizzled some of that chopped parsley that you can barely see on camera. And I kind of like it like that because I see it here to my eye, but we don't want to overwhelm it with too much parsley. We don't want to hide this beautiful frito that we did. I put a ramekin of that aioli right in the middle so that we could dip it. Some lemon wedges just right around it. And we have our salad.
Thank you.
Our salad. Sorry?
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Enjoy
Carlos
your
is
meal.
already dipping in.
I love it. That's the move. That's the move. If you are done cooking, by all means, go enjoy it. This is best eaten right away. I'm just gonna give my my salad a bit of a drizzle so you can see what that would look like. And it's just a bit of balsamic drizzle to finish that off. That balsamic drizzle is gonna look amazing in contrast with that cheese and the tomatoes. And here we have it. We have a frito misto with a caprese salad. Pilar, you okay? You still frazzled?
Yeah,
going
it
on?
looks so pretty. It looks so pretty.
Well, yours is gonna look like that too. Don't worry, we'll get there.
We are so behind.
That's okay.
We are still frying